Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre wasn't just talking about this today. He spent a second straight day stumping for votes in the greater Toronto area. And the Conservative leader started in Vaughan with an announcement on housing before heading to Hamilton, where he'll have a rally tonight.
It's almost surreal, isn't it? 10 years ago, $1 million would have got you a castle on a mountain overlooking a valley of gold. A new Conservative government will put Canada first by taking GST, the federal sales tax, off of all homes under $1.3 million.
But Poilievre is facing questions about foreign interference. He targeted Liberal Leader Mark Carney, questioning some of Carney's business record as chair of Brookfield. NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh is talking about the high cost of housing today, and Singh started day 3 of this campaign in one of Canada's most unaffordable cities to live, Toronto. Tonight, he'll hold a rally an hour south of that in Hamilton, and Singh is pinning the blame for the housing crisis on corporate landlords and people like Mark Carney.
Like, if you think you're up against a housing crisis now, and the chair of a company that said, hey, the best opportunity since the financial crisis to make money off the people in housing is the housing crisis, that's not your guy. That's not the guy that's going to fix the problem. But he made that.
Those new attack lines come as polling shows the NDP are at risk of losing many seats, and the CBC's Marina von Stackelberg is following that campaign. Marina.
Hey, David. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh admitted for the first time in this campaign that his party is up against what he calls massive challenges. The New Democrats continue to fall in the polls, and it appears they're losing support to Mark Carney. And so the NDP spent time today talking about the Liberal leader. Now, we are in downtown Toronto right now. It is one of the most expensive places to try to rent an apartment. That's if you're lucky enough to find one here. It's also a place known for renovictions, where people are kicked out of their apartments so a landlord can do renovations and then jack up the rent. So Singh has really been focusing on this issue of housing across the country. He didn't make any new announcements about that today, but instead he met with a mom who lives in the area. She rents an apartment. She lives there with her son. And that apartment building was purchased by Brookfield Asset Management. And she says, when that happened, the rent in her building doubled. Now, why is Brookfield important? It's because that is the company that Liberal leader Mark Carney was the chair of before he decided to run for the Liberals. Now, he has cut ties with Brookfield, but Singh's point is that when Carney was in that top executive job, Brookfield made the decision to purchase rental properties to turn a profit. And so while Singh says he doesn't hold Carney personally responsible for this, he says the decisions that he made in that job show, in Singh's words, where his priorities are.
Okay, that was the CBC's Marina von Stackelberg in Toronto. François, let's pick it up there. Jagmeet Singh is going after Mark Carney as a guy who headed up a company that essentially he was a profiteering corporate landlord. And, we also saw allegations from Pierre Poilievre earlier about Mr. Carney's meetings with the Chinese bank and his company getting a $250 million loan, Brookfield, on a financing of a property from the Bank of China. What do you make of this line of attack on the Liberal leader?
Well, I thought that for Poilievre, let's start with that, is best in the sense that the best defense is the offense. So he had a good way to say, oh, you're attacking me. What about him? And then at the same time, lo and behold, you had Jagmeet Singh using the kind of the same argument, but more on the corporate size and who is Mark Carney and what does he represent, and trying to fit it with the narrative of yesterday and today's announcement about affordable housing. All this normally in any type of election might score big points. And as I say to a lot of people around me that I talk to about this crazy campaign that we're in because of what's happening south of our border, there's some concept that people will just hear, listen to, and say, okay, next. They still go back to who can be our prime minister. So it is kind of infuriating because those are all valid points. I mean, there's some important questions that we need to have answers from Mr. Carney about those Chinese dealing. I've been in business enough to know that it's not as dark and terrible and so on and so forth as the Conservatives was making it sound. And he has to answer also to some of the claim that the NDP are doing on him. So, but does that resonate? I'm not sure. And that's where I find politics utterly sometimes unfair, because what you had to battle on and prove and bring dollars and cents doesn't count no more, because this is not the type of election that we are in.
Yeah, the $250 million loan, the best information we can find on that in reporting from Bloomberg and other financial reporting outlets was to refinance the loan for an office tower in Shanghai that Brookfield owns. So that's what it is. It's a real estate refinancing. You can draw your own conclusions on whether that is a conflict in some way. But Emily, the pitch from the Liberals on Mark Carney is his resume is punctuated with experience that makes him the right person for the job at this point in time, and the Conservatives say, and the NDP say, it is punctuated with experiences that show he is unworthy of this and riddled with conflicts of interest. How do you think this attack is playing?
So it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the Liberals and the global elite etiquette. This is or sticker. This is what both the NDP and the Conservatives are trying to do today. But I do find it really interesting that Carney is being attacked for what he's done in his essentially private career, rather than being attacked for the record of the Trudeau government. I find that in this there is unspoken admission that Mark Carney isn't the continuation of the Trudeau government, while at the same time Pierre Poilievre and the NDP are saying this is the same government that broke promises on this and this and that. And so if you're attacking Mark Carney not on what the Trudeau government is saying, Pierre Poilievre is basically saying Mark Carney isn't Justin Trudeau, in between the lines, which I find fascinating in terms of how they're choosing to attack the guy on what he did outside of government, rather than him being the leader of a party that has been in power for 10 years.
Kate, on this attack, there's a lot of, it could be this, it could be that. There's no evidence of wrongdoing here that has been laid out. I mean, what do you see as the issue here for Mark Carney?
These are not activities that happened prior to any involvement with the government. If you look at the timeline, he was advising the Liberal Party on economic matters before going to China to have this meeting with a state-controlled bank about a private business dealing. The whole point the Conservatives are making around potential or perceived conflicts of interest is around him holding both those roles in parallel. So when he is pressed on these matters and on these potential conflicts of interest, he gets very edgy. You can tell he's visibly annoyed by these questions when they are posed to him. I point to the interview that he did with your colleague, Rosemary, that is emblematic of this. He should just answer the question, what the purpose of this meeting was, and especially advising the Liberal government at a time when relations with China were rightly incredibly frosty. We had just come off of the 2-year holding of the two Michaels. We've now since found out that they've executed 4 Canadians. It is fair for Canadians and Conservatives to be asking the question about the nature of his business dealings with a regime and a country that has been actively hostile and murdered Canadian citizens. It is fair to ask that at a time when he's also advising the Liberal Party of Canada on economic matters.
Michelle, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, clearly Poilievre needed to fight back in some way. I'm not sure that trying to draw some kind of a conclusion from this of refinancing of a loan, as I understand it, is going to draw blood on this particular issue. I think that, again, the more that we're not, that Canadians aren't talking about and seeing these people put themselves forward as a positive alternative to be the Prime Minister, I think you're losing it that day. I don't think that they want to see that kind of hyper-partisanship that we talked about in the earlier segment once again on display, trying to go after Mark Carney. Mr. Carney, I think that he's probably got a little bit thicker skin now on some of these questions that he's being asked, and was a lot more measured in terms of his response, and brought it back to the issue at hand. Again, who is going to be standing up for Canada against Donald Trump? And Mr. Poilievre has had a terrible couple days. He didn't stand up to Danielle Smith. And I think Canadians will draw their conclusions from that about whether he would be up to the job to stand up to Donald Trump. And now he's trying to deflect again on another issue and coming off again as very hyper-partisan. And so I think that I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps a little bit of a refresh and recheck was taking place in the Conservative headquarters to try and get a little bit more of a different stature being put forward when he's out on the campaign trail.
Kate, do you see a reset coming?
No, and I'm struggling, David, with what is partisan about asking the Prime Minister of Canada about the nature of his dealings with Beijing when he was advising the Liberal Party. That is not a partisan question. I think it is fair to ask if you are advising the governing party of Canada while simultaneously conducting private business dealings, the nature of those dealings.
The public record, though, says it was a refinancing of a loan tied to an office tower. Where's the ethical problem in that?
It is with a regime that is executing Canadian citizens. This is not a time when we should be looking to work more with China and with hostile countries. So he needs to answer questions around the nature of those conversations. Comes back to the previous conversations around, what he was advising Brookfield around the location of their headquarters. And so it's clear to me that there is a potential or a perceived issue here where he is simultaneously advising the Liberal Party and acting in a private business interest. You can choose one or the other, but you probably can't have both happen at the same time. And not expect this question to come up.
So, Francoise, Lisa Raitt was on the show last night, former Conservative cabinet minister and deputy leader, and she said, moving your headquarters, she said Canadian companies do it all the time. She said it wasn't a big deal to her. I don't know. I'm not a corporate expert. I've talked to Ian Stedman, who is he is with the Osgoode Hall Law School, about the blind trust divestment of assets, and he says this is the way it is done, and Mark Carney has complied with every standard of it. But yet you still have these persistent questions. He was the Prime Minister's advisor. I mean, how do you think Canadians view this? Do you think there's traction in this? Because the experts you talk to say he's done what he's required to do, but I don't know if the laws have contemplated someone coming in as the chairman of a company that controls billions in assets without having a seat and sort of gone through the crucible of elected life before. But here we are,
Here we are indeed. And to your question, how people will react, I think they're going to react according to partisan line. If you inclined towards the Conservatives, you'll say, hey, I want answers. I think this is disgusting because it's in the inference. I have zero problem, and Kate is right. You can ask the question, but the inference before you get the answer to the question is where I always draw my line. I want to hear the answer, what you just talked about, David. Let Mark Carney say this. Explain to people what gives in the business thing, and it can be done very quickly along the lines that you just said. If you're a Liberal, you're saying, "Oh, this is just a smear tactics." If you're a more soft voter, we're not too sure where you go to. Well, right. You're looking at all these people and try to see with whom you affiliate more or feel more at ease with, who feels more transparent. A lot of people say you will not vote for something, you'll vote against somebody else. So all this play along. So I hope he's well surrounded, that he's got good advisor, that they don't just push this and say there's nothing. Because some days another thing can come out and another thing. And knowing the Conservatives, they're so ready, election ready. I'm sure they have books of things to throw at him. Well, that's for them to be ready for these things and for him to get, yes, a thicker skin and to just look frank and answer simply the question. I think that would be it. But I think it's very technical, and I'm not sure people understand all the ramification of those questions.
Okay, Emily, quick thoughts on that, and then I want to switch to the next topic.
The difference between our first topic about Pierre Poilievre and this topic is that the attack on Mark Carney is coming from Poilievre. The attack on Carney came from the Globe and Mail and Bonfibe and Stephen Chase. And there's a big difference in terms of...
For the attack on Poilievre, you mean? So you said
yes,
Carney.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So basically, when journalists are doing some digging and finding something, it resonates differently than if it's a political leader attacking another leader. And I'm just reflecting on this as we know, the Conservative side has chosen not to have journalists on their planes and on their campaign bus. If they do find some dirt on Mark Carney, it'd be really handy for them to have some journalists to whisper them to, so that the journalists do some digging. I think their attacks would resonate a lot more, but because they're isolating themselves from journalists, there's also opportunities for attacks on the Liberal Party that they're also isolating themselves from, because this is how the game is played, and it's much more effective if it's on the front page of the Globe and Mail than if it's coming from a partisan leader, in which people just see it as a partisan attack. If there is some smoking gun in there, people will find out. If that's their job, to find out actually the bottom of the truth.
Yeah, and it was the Globe and Mail that did a lot of the reporting on the foreign interference issues that caused so much.
They'd be interested in that for sure.
Yeah, for sure.